Okay, today we're going to rationalize denominators. When you rationalize a denominator, what you're doing is getting rid of the radical on the bottom of the fraction or the denominator of the fraction. For all your future math classes from here on out, we're going to expect that anytime you give me an answer or you give an answer in a math class that you never have a radical in the bottom of your denominator, that you rationalize it. So it's the same thing as the expectation that you reduce your fraction. And an answer, we also expect you to simplify your radicals and to rationalize your radicals. To do that, there's 3 steps. The first step is always simplify any radicals. So make sure all the radicals are simplified first. Then we'll rationalize the denominator, which I'll show you how to do that. And then at the end, your very end answer should be simplified. So make sure you simplify all the radicals at the end. So if I look at the first question, radical 13 over radical 5, neither of those can be simplified. So I need to get rid of the radical 5 on the bottom. I'm going to use the idea that if I take radical 5 times radical 5, that gives me radical 25, which is just 5. So when I multiply two radicals that are the same, I end up getting just what's underneath the radical. And that gets rid of the radical for me. So I'm going to multiply the top and bottom by radical 5. That's just like multiplying the fraction times 1, right? Radical 5 over radical 5 simplifies down to 1. So I'm going to multiply the bottom by radical 5 and the top by radical 5. What does that give me? The top is going to give me radical 13 times radical 5. The bottom is going to give me radical 5 times radical 5, which is radical 25, so it just gives me 5. So I end up with, on the top, radical 65 over 5. And that's my final answer because radical 65 can't be simplified. So this can't be simplified. And so my answer is in the simplest forms. I spelled that wrong. So my final answer is radical 65 over 5. Let's look at another one. Radical 7a over radical 12. Radical 7a can't be simplified. No perfect squares in there, but radical 12 can be simplified. That's really 4 times 3, and 4 is 2 and 2. So I can take out a 2 and I'm left with the 3 underneath. So this now simplifies to 7a, radical 7a over 2 radical 3. So now I need to get rid of the radical. So I'm going to multiply top and bottom by radical 3. So on the top, I get 21a. On the bottom, I'm going to get 2 times radical 3 times radical 3. That's just going to get me 3. So I end up with radical 21a over 6. That's my final answer. Radical 21a can't be simplified. So I'm done at this point. I think these problems can be frustrating because you don't know when you're done. So you always just look and say, is there anything else that I can do? Can I simplify the radicals? Is there any other things that I can simplify? Do I have the radical out of the bottom of the fraction? Once you get to that point, then you're done. I just have a couple more just examples. If we look at 2 radical 80 over radical 7. First thing that I notice is I can simplify radical 80. That's going to be 16 times 5. 16 is a perfect square of 4 and 4. So I can take out a pair of 4s and I'm left with a 5 underneath. So this really becomes 2 times the 4 I take out, and I'm left with radical 5 underneath, which leaves me with 8 radical 5 over radical 7. Now I need to rationalize. I need to get rid of the radical 7 on the bottom. So I multiply times radical 7 over radical 7, which is the same thing as multiplying times 1. On the top, I'm going to get 8 times radical 35. That comes from the 7 times the 5. On the bottom, radical 7 times radical 7 is radical 49, which is really just 7. I am now completely simplified because radical 35 cannot be simplified any further. Okay? And last one here. When I look at this last one, I notice that radical 18 can be simplified. 18 is really 9 times 2, and 9 is a perfect square of 3 and 3. So I can take out a 3 and leave a 2 underneath. So I end up with radical 3x all over, take out the 3, and I have a radical 2 on the bottom. I'm going to have to multiply top and bottom by radical 2 over radical 2. The top will give me square root of 6x. The bottom is going to give me 3 times radical 2 times radical 2 is radical 4, which is 2. So I get a 2. So my final answer is square root 6x over 6. And I'm completely simplified. I can't cancel those 6's because one's under a radical. Square root of 6 is a different value than 6. So I can't simplify anything on the bottom with the top unless they were both under a radical. So there are only 4 examples. They're kind of short. I'll have a Google Meet later on here in the day. So if you have questions on the homework, we can go over those questions from the homework. All right, we'll talk to you later.